Greeting comrades in COSATU and everywhere else. Today I would like to briefly speak about Palestinian prisoners and what they represent in the larger Palestinian narrative and political discourse. First, let's just try to get some kind of an idea of how Israel uses imprisonment as a way to subdue the Palestinian people. According to the United Nations, anywhere between 750,000 and 800,000 Palestinians were imprisoned between 1967 and until a few years ago. Now, this number includes about 23,000 women and 25,000 children. So nobody is immune from imprisonment by Israel. Uh, Imprisoned Palestinians include Muslims and Christians, include people who come from religious ideological movements or secular movements, socialists, communists, and so forth. In other words, if there is one element that unifies the Palestinian people in the eyes of Israel, it's the Israeli prisons and the imprisonment experience. Everybody is subjected to or is subject to be imprisoned and tortured, and everyone could potentially find himself in that situation, regardless of the Israeli pretense of why she or he is being imprisoned. For example, many Palestinians are spending many years in Israeli prisons because of what they refer to as security prisoners or security situations, as these are people who have taken part in various resistance attacks or missions, or potentially had the intention of carrying out missions of this nature against the Israeli occupation. Now, this is not to be confused with the fact that Israel imprisons Palestinians for a reason or no reason. And for example, you have Palestinians who are in Israeli prisons as we speak because of certain posts they put on social media, because of a tweet or a Facebook post. We have Palestinian imprisoned for daring to carry a Palestinian flag because they consider this to be a form of incitement against the Israeli occupation. There are Palestinian prisoners who are poets and artists because they also consider poetry and art a form of incitement. Another important aspect of the Palestinian imprisonment experience in Israel is that Israel does not adhere to international law or to humanitarian laws in the way that they treat and imprison Palestinians. Most Palestinians, the vast majority of them, are tried in Israel by military courts that have no international monitoring, no Red Cross or any other form of international monitors to ensure that these trials are done in a way that is consistent with the Geneva Convention or other international law and regulations. Israel tortures Palestinian prisoners as a matter of course, even though a few years ago the Israeli Supreme Court finally decided that torture should be illegal under Israeli law. Few years later they changed that and they said, well, in some cases maybe it is okay for Israel to torture. Therefore we are back to square one and torture is a matter of course, and it happens to every Palestinian prisoner regardless of age, of gender, of anything else, and or the nature of the accusation. Today actually, as I was preparing to record this video, there was an incident near Hebron where three Palestinian children, actually five Palestinian children, including three brothers, who were arrested by the Israeli army. There are children who are ages of 7, 8, and 9 who were arrested by the Israeli army for picking fruits and vegetables from their family farm near Hebron. First, the Israeli settlers harassed them, tried to push them out of that area. The children stayed, and the Israeli army came and arrested them. There are no news about where are they right now and how they are being treated. As I am recording this video only a few hours after the news came out that these children have been arrested by the Israeli army. Again, a matter of course. This happens every single day in Palestine, in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, and elsewhere. Now, I think it's also important that we mention that when we talk about Palestinian prisoners, we're not talking about a marginal issue or a separate issue from the larger imprisonment experience of the Palestinian people. If you are a Palestinian living in Palestine itself, then the chances are not only that you have been arrested or detained at one point in the past, but that you are experiencing some form of imprisonment, whether you are living in a village that is isolated by the Israeli army, by the apartheid wall that encircles your village, your town, your city. You need a permit to go out of your town. You need a permit to go to Jerusalem. You have to stand in these long lines before military checkpoints in order for you to reach your farm, your school, your place of work, to leave occupied Palestine or to come back. There is this imprisonment that hovers over the Palestinian existence. All Palestinians are prisoners. And the prison guard is Israel, the Israeli government, the Israeli army, the Israeli entity as a whole. In fact, if there is anything that continues to govern the relationship between Israel and the Palestinian people in the last 5 decades and more, since the Israeli occupation of 1967 and even prior to that, is the fact that Israel continues to play the prison guard, the role of the prison guard, and Palestinians continue to be the prisoner. So now we talk about 5,200 Palestinian prisoners who are currently in Israeli prisons, including hundreds of women and children. But these men and women are only a microcosm of a larger prison experience that is being experienced by every single Palestinian. So this is why we refer to Gaza, for example, as the world's largest open-air prison. Gaza is under siege. It has been under siege since 2006. We're looking here at about 15 years. The majority of the population in Gaza are young people and children who have never experienced a day in their entire existence on this earth in which they actually experience life outside of this world's largest open-air prison. As the siege continues, 2 million people in Gaza remain hostage. They are surrounded by the Israeli military throughout the border area that separates Gaza from Israel, but also they are being monitored by unmanned drones, numerous warships at the Mediterranean Sea, at the coast of Gaza, watching every movement. Nobody can come in, nobody can go out. This is imprisonment. This is an actual prison experience. Now, for a long time, we as Palestinians have been asked, and I don't get asked this question in South Africa itself. I get asked this question oftentimes outside South Africa of people who try to perhaps marginalize the Palestinian people, discount their struggle, or put the onus on the Palestinians as if we are not doing enough to bring the Israeli occupation to an end. One question we get asked quite often: where is your Nelson Mandela? For example, why Palestinians haven't produced a Nelson Mandela, and why aren't the Palestinians capable of creating an iconic leader for their own struggle? It's a very kind of interesting take on events, considering that, number one, the Palestinian people as a whole, their everyday struggle, their resistance, their sumud, their steadfastness, their everyday acts of cultural resistance and actual resistance makes the entirety of the Palestinian people as a collective to be that Nelson Mandela, that leader that is going to guide us and towards the day in which Palestine is free from Israeli occupation. But there is also another answer to that, is that we actually have thousands of Palestinian Mandelas, the likes of Ahmed Sadat from the socialist group, the PFLP, the likes of Marwan Barghouti of Fatah, the likes of Khaled Jarrar, one of the greatest and most engaged intellectuals and feminists in the Palestinian struggles, who are currently in prison, who are currently serving times. Some of them been held, like Marwan Barghouti and Ahmed Sadat, for nearly 2 decades, and Khaled Jarrar, who is a lawyer, a very respected lawyer, and who has been trying to participate in indicting Israel in front of the International Criminal Court, has been sentenced as of 1 week ago to 2 years in Israeli prisons. We have many Nelson Mandelas. We have many women and men who are capable of playing this historic role, but they are in prison. Those who haven't been assassinated by Israeli drones and Israeli rockets and missiles and assassins are in prison. We have an incredible leadership that expresses not just the agony and the suffering and the pain of the Palestinian people, but also the resistance and the steadfastness and the clarity of vision and the political unity and the unity of purpose of the Palestinian people. They are all in prison. This is why, comrades, sisters, brothers, when we look at when we discuss the issue of Palestinian prisoners, we can't exclusively discuss it as if it's a humanitarian issue. We can't exclusively discuss it as if it's a mere issue of Israel violating this agreement or that agreement. It has to be discussed at the core of the Palestinian struggle, because number one, it's a microcosm of the collective Palestinian imprisonment. All these 5 million Palestinians and more in Palestine itself are all experiencing that prison experience in one way or the other. But also because our leadership is in prison. The people that Israel doesn't like, the people that Israel doesn't want to represent us internationally, regionally, and nationally. These are our Nelson Mandelas. These are our fighters, our comrades, the people who are carrying on with the liberation struggle, because it really is a liberation struggle and has never been anything but a liberation struggle. These prisoners, what I call organic intellectuals, based on the definition set forth by the great comrade Antonio Gramsci, they are Palestine's engaged intellectuals, organic intellectuals, true leadership. We have to understand them, engage with them, talk to them, listen to their writings from prison, and when they leave prison, truly as the representatives of the Palestinian people. So this is my view on the issue, and I thank you so very much for taking the time to address this urgent issue that means a great deal for the Palestinian people, since it's the core of our struggle throughout the years. One final thing I'd like to say is, if you can access my latest book, These Chains Will Be Broken, Palestinian Stories of Struggle and Defiance in Israeli Prisons, please do so. It's a very important book, as it's one of very few books out there that allows the Palestinian prisoners themselves to articulate a very grounded political discourse, talking about their own experience, individual and collective experiences, but also allow them to communicate a message that is rarely heard, not only in mainstream media, but also in many circles that purports to be pro-Palestinian as well. Let's listen to these women and men, these comrades of ours, because their struggle is our collective struggle, whether in South Africa or anywhere else around the world. Thank you again for taking the time to listen to me. And until I see you, hopefully personally, in South Africa again, please take care. Bye-bye.